Okay, hello everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We have a few more people still signing up online or coming up online, but we'll just go ahead and get started. Today we'll focus more on Qualtrics, the tool. But before we do that, I just want to do a little bit of setup, seeing that we have a number of students also signed in, so thought it might be helpful to look at consideration for IRB questions, things like that, setting up some of that, and then we'll spend more time on the tool itself. Before I get any further, let me introduce myself. I'm Navadeep Khanal. I'm the e-learning librarian at the library here.
And I'm Kimberly Moeller. I'm one of the social sciences librarians that works here in the research services department. Oh, and I can't see. There's a camera.
Just waving at people online. So just a little bit of setup thing for the format for the session. We'll look at just very quickly things to consider like ethics, quality improvement, research, data integrity, that kind of stuff. Then we'll look at Qualtrics basics and some of the advanced features, and then we'll look at reviewing, editing data, and generating reports and things like that. If at any point you have a question, please feel free to ask. For those of you online, please feel free to either raise your hand and put a question in the chat, or go ahead and chat. We'll be monitoring that too. So I just wanted to point out a few things to consider, and I'll run through this real quick, is considering what the purpose of the survey is. So does your survey include human subjects? Are you going to be collecting personal data? Will you be requiring will you require consent from participants and either to participate or to use that data? And we'll look at why these considerations in a little bit, and what assurances can you give that you can safely store that data and manage that data. So for IRB purposes on campus, and for those of you planning your first survey or first research, this will be an important consideration. And the distinction being made here is between research and quality improvement. A lot of people maybe working on campus want to know how good their services are, how are they being used, so on and so forth. So we want to create a quick survey and send it out to participants. And then there's research, and research particularly involving human subjects. And this is from the IRB's homepage. I took this distinction that they make that will determine whether your research project needs to be reviewed by the campus review board. So research, they're particularly looking at, is it going to contribute to generalizable knowledge? Are you going to be writing a paper and saying, I did research and this population thinks this way? So that constitutes in a way one way to just say, is this research versus is this quality improvement, where we need to know how we are doing, we need to get feedback from users, and we're not collecting identifiable information. And the second part, human subjects, living individuals. If the person is dead, in most cases this does not concern review. So are you collecting that data through intervention, or is that data already being collected and stored in campus facilities? So for example, if you need to work with some student data that is not identifiable, most probably you may not need to get a review, for example. If you get any kind of identifiable data to students, to people, groups, you want to go through IRB just to make sure you're on the safe side. And again, I just want to point this out, the IRB's main webpage If you are planning research, please do visit this. And IRB does also make a distinction about what kind of research is to be reviewed. So if you have health, medical related versus general campus IRB, and then IRB has 3 different types of reviews they do. Well, one, you present a proposal and they say, okay, this does not meet the human subject requirements, you don't need to be reviewed. The other is, okay, this looks like it's fairly safe, no harm done, the risk is minimal, expedited review that goes through. And then, okay, there are considerable questions that need to be considered, and that goes through a full board review, and that takes a little while. So I'm just pointing this out. And again, on their website, what kind of review that you might want to go through. Are you part of the health sciences, any of these departments? And again, looking at IRB and choosing on that link, you'll find that information. On the campus IRB side, I'll urge you to look at that link if you're planning on doing research, a list of activities that you don't need review for. And some requirements to think about as you're planning to create your survey or do your research is, you'll need to get consent, you'll need to consider how you're going to save your data and keep it safe. If you're a student, you will need to talk to your advisor and get approval through IRB. You'll need their signature. You'll need to think about the research method and design, length of the study. So if it's every year, you need to get it ratified again and say, look, the study is going on. I need to get an IRB approval again, and your methods and tools. And so on this page, researchers, it gives you a list of those considerations. And in the red box, I list research instruments, questionnaires, and interview questions. And this is kind of a good jump-off point because you will need to supply them what instrument you'll be using. And I'll end here for this part and let Kimberly take over.
Okay, I'm actually going to be showing you what the tool looks like and how to get started with it. And we want to do that through Firefox. As I mentioned to the people in class, but for those of you online who didn't hear it previously, Qualtrics doesn't really play well with Google Chrome. So you'll want to pick either Firefox or Internet Explorer to use while you're looking at this. And we specifically don't want the Blackboard site. We want Qualtrics survey. Please let us know in the chat box if any of you online cannot see this page. The website for Qualtrics is missouri.qualtrics.com, and Qualtrics is Qualtrics. I'll just give you a second to find that web page, and you will need to log in using your University of Missouri paw print and password. So the same thing that you would use to get onto MyZoo or email, pretty much anything on this campus. I'll just give you a few minutes to do that. So Nav did just talk a little bit about consent. For a lot of surveys, you can work with the consent issue by putting in a letter of consent at the very, very beginning of your survey. Typically, it's a short paragraph that just says who you are, why you're doing the research, and lets the subject or the interviewee know why they're taking the survey and what its main purpose is. And typically, for things with human subjects that are a bit more controversial, that's good enough, and we'll talk about how you can do that. So you can see that my page has some surveys that have already been created, already been run. You can see they have responses, but we're going to start from scratch. I think that Qualtrics is pretty intuitive to use, but if you do have questions as we go along or buttons that we're not talking about, please feel free to stop me and ask. I'm just going to be clicking on that button that says Create Survey, and it's going to take us to a page that has 3 different options. The Quick Survey Builder is the one we're going to work with the most, but I do want to touch on the other 2 really quickly. Create from Copy. This only works if you already have surveys in your library, things that you've already created. So if you've created a survey and you want to run a similar one or run the same one to see if responses have changed. So maybe you run a survey with your students at the start of the semester to see where they're at, and you want to repeat that survey at the end. You would create a new survey so that the data doesn't get combined together, but you could create the exact same one from a copy and just have a second duplicate version. So it can be useful if you do want to run a similar survey. A survey library is kind of a bank of surveys that Qualtrics has already created for you. So instead of from your library, you can find one from the global Qualtrics library and pick a category, for example, academic research. There are a lot of others here. I think the K through 12 education surveys are pretty great if you're working in teaching and you want to maybe do a quiz of your students again. But there's a lot of different versions. Marketing can be a really good one if you're trying to determine how well your organization is portrayed. But if you pick one of those, it'll give you a drop-down list of how many surveys have been created in this particular category. For the one I picked, which is just the first one, academic research, it was the first one alphabetically, there's an informed consent template, which you can use. It's editable. You can add in your own phone numbers, your own contact information, but it's just kind of a basic template. It's a little bit lengthier than you typically need to go into, but I'll create that survey just so you can see what it looks like if one is created. We'll give it a second to load. And again, this is a template. You don't have to leave it the way it is. If you just click on the box with all the text, it's very changeable. You can get rid of paragraphs. You can add things. If there are issues with confidentiality, if you wanted to add in, again, your own contact information, you could certainly do all of that. Yeah?
How do you output that to a document?
How do you output that? We'll actually be getting into that a little bit later. Yep, you can output any of these surveys. Typically, Qualtrics is best used when you're using it online, when you're sending it through an email, posting it to social media, or using just the link. But you can output it to Microsoft, both Excel and Windows, and we will talk about that a little bit later. So I'm just going to back up and go back to that first tab, My Survey, at the top. And we're going to go back to Create a Survey. So it's going to give us those three options. And the one that we want to spend the most time on is Quick Survey Builder. So this is if you're creating a survey from scratch, that you want to start completely at the beginning. It's just your work. And I'm going to call this one Qualtrics Demo, because that is kind of what this is right now. If you have a library where you have a lot of surveys and you want to organize them, you can organize in folders just like you would your inbox for your email or your computer in general, but we're just going to create a survey for now and not worry about organization. And this is going to bring you to a blank slate. There will be nothing in the survey, it's just a blank slate. So the first thing you'll typically want to do is create a new item. If you see that green button in the middle that says create a new item, it'll automatically pop up with a question that is multiple choice. The default is always a multiple choice question. But if you look on the right-hand side, there's a drop-down list, and it gives you a variety of other options. Descriptive text is the first one. And each one that you hover over, it should give you an example of what that looks like. So if we wanted multiple choice, there's an example of a multiple choice question. If you didn't know what some of these were, matrix, table, text entry, it shows you an example of what it looks like in the end. Now I'm going to start out just by, actually, typically you do want to start with descriptive text, because as I mentioned, that letter of consent is usually a great way to start out a survey. It's the first page. If you've ever taken a survey to help anyone in one of your departments with research, typically the first thing that comes up is a paragraph that details what the project is about, why the survey is being conducted. You can write that here and just say descriptive information. I'm not going to go into too much detail on any of these questions because, of course, you'll be making up your own questions as you're running these. So typically, I would almost always recommend that your first question be that descriptive text. After that, it's really up to you. You can play around with an assortment, or you can try to stay very standardized and have each question look relatively similar. I do want to show you what maybe one of the other ones would look like, so let's just do rank order as a fun one. So what is your favorite movie? Again, not a terribly detailed question. I'll just put a few down. Or just some relatively well-known movies. You can see that each time we've created a question, it's given us 3 options. You might want far more than 3 options, or you might only want 2. Say it's a yes, no, or a true, false question. You can change that over here right under the green button that allows you to pick which type of question you're asking. So say I wanted to have a 4th movie in this rank. I could just add as many or as few as I wanted. Does anyone have a favorite movie? The Notebook? Okay. All right, so we'll put that in there. So what is your favorite movie? When the person taking the survey gets to a rank order question, they'll just drag their favorite up to the top and in order. Pretty straightforward. There are a number of other options as well. So if we create a new question, maybe you want to add something that if they picked Harry Potter as their first movie, you want to know which one. So you could ask that question and say, okay, which Harry Potter movie was your favorite? And again, you could pick any type of question you wanted us to ask. And just
Questions in class.
Yeah.
So, and that's only corresponding if they, like, let's say they pick Star Wars, it wouldn't even ask that question.
Well, right now it would. If I only wanted this question to show up if they picked Harry Potter as their first,
yeah.
What you would do is on this right-hand side, it does give you a lot of other options. For example, instead of having a single radio button, you could say, okay, I want them to be able to pick multiple answers. So you can switch between single and multiple pretty easy. And if you've taken a survey before, the general way it's portrayed is if they can only answer once, it's a circular button. If they can check mark multiple, it would be a little box.
And then I think we'll be covering the piping a little later.
Yeah. So if I only wanted this to show up if they picked Harry Potter, what I would do is come down here and add display logic. Does everyone see that? It's at the bottom left-hand side. What you would do is say, okay, on question number 2, what is your favorite movie? If they selected Harry Potter as their number 1 choice, that's the only time I want this question to be displayed. So display this question only if the following condition is met. And you can see that you can change it to be you could say equals to 1, or you can say is greater than or equal to, less than. So you can change that up quite a bit. In this particular case, I'm going to leave it as only if they put Harry Potter was their first choice. That's the only time when I actually care. So if you save that, it does show you in the question then that this question is special. It's not always going to show up because we have that display logic associated with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And say we add another question, and I'm going to do a matrix table this time. You start getting multiple areas where you can put in information. So let's see. What is important to you? And we can say not important, very important on the other end, maybe know what, I can't type correctly today, I apologize for that, or attempt, and then not sure in the middle, and we'll say, okay, food versus dessert versus snacks. Just general, I'm throwing in random things at the moment. Clearly, these questions aren't anything actually academic in nature. Again, though, you'd want to look at the top, and you see since we have more options for this, since there's 2 different columns and 2 different rows, all of a sudden you have the ability to add scale points in more directions. So you could add, if you wanted to do a 5-point Likert scale, you would add, that would add 5 questions, and then a 5-point Likert scale would be the scale points themselves. You can see you can add more columns, you can add more rows, as many or as few as you want. Oh, okay. I know that it's sometimes a little bit difficult. This is a small flaw in Qualtrics, where when you're in a specific question, the sidebar that's on the right doesn't always scroll down with you. So sometimes you have to scroll back and forth a fair amount. And the longer your questionnaire gets, the more complicated that can be. Okay. And you don't always want to have all of your questions on the same page. So for example, frequently people will add just the paragraph, the descriptive text at the beginning on its own separate page before they get into the questionnaire. So if people aren't interested in taking the questionnaire, they can just close out the screen and not see the rest of it. So if you wanted to add page breaks, you would do so down here at the bottom as well, where it says add page break, right above where we used add display logic before. And that adds a page break. It adds it at the very bottom. So you have to kind of move it up to where you want it to be, and you move it up using those arrows that show up on the left-hand side. So if you hover over where your page break is, there will be arrows that allow you to move it up questions. So maybe I want in theory, this descriptive information is standing for my letter of consent. If you want your letter of consent on a specific page, you could add a page break there. And maybe you wanted to add another one because you want your questions about movies separate from your questions about food. So we'll move that up as well. Okay, are there questions about that as well? There's also the ability to add, again, I'm sorry for all the scrolling. There's the, if you see that box on the side, there's the ability to add skip logic. So again, if someone doesn't want to take the questionnaire after they've read that initial consent letter, they can either, one, close out the screen, but you could also add in a question saying, are you going to take this questionnaire? And if they say yes, it'll continue on to the questionnaire. And if they say no, it'll go to the end and say thank you for your time and not actually give them the rest of the questions. You'll see this a lot in marketing surveys. So if it's someone trying to sell TVs and they want to know what your interest in TVs is, one of their questions might be very pointed, like how often do you watch TV? And if you say never, it'll say thank you for your time. So you can add the skip logic into a questionnaire. So it adds here, and you can see that it delays and it lets you skip to the end of the survey. So for example, I'm going to get rid of that one to start with. If I were to add, I should also mention, I'm skipping around a little bit here, which I apologize for. If you wanted to add questions into the survey, you don't have to add them at the bottom and then move them up. You can just add them before a question or after by going to the question where you want your new inquiry to be and then using the little plus button. So if I want a question right below, I just click that green plus button and it pops up with a new question before my page break. So, will you take the survey? They. And we're going to say yes or no. And you can see it kind of understands leading questions like that. And we'll use our add skip logic. Again, that's how we would get them to go to the end of the survey without taking the whole thing. So we'll add skip logic to this particular question. And if yes is selected, or let's say if no is selected, then skip to the end of the survey. And you can skip to anywhere in the survey you want. So again, if it's a leading question, if you're marketing and you want to know, okay, do you use the radio ever? And they say no, skip to television. Do you use television ever? If they say no, you can skip to book. I mean, whatever your product is that you're marketing, you can do so as well. For this one, since the answer would be no, you won't take the survey, it will just jump them to the end of the survey. So if no is selected, then skip to end of the survey. Yeah.
I don't know the question would be in order because I noticed that the newest question is how many times.
The questions are ordered by the numeric order that you put them in, but no, the survey will show up the way that it does on the screen, with them in the order that you place them in, not with the numeric order they're assigned.
Out of the, you can actually change it out of the block options.
Yes. So block options is something I was going to get into a little bit further down the line, but we can do now. Blocks are just groups of questions. So if you, for example, were working with a class that had multiple parts to it, so if you're doing general assessment of a second grade classroom and you want to have a math section and a reading section, you could have those as different blocks. And say you didn't want the people next to each other to be able to work on the same section at the same time, you could randomize which one of those blocks would pop up first. So one person would be working on math, the person next to them might be doing reading, the person next to them might be doing English, and it would all be very randomized, which is great too if you're doing quizzes in class. So you can have the same questions, but if you put them each in their own block, they will show up at random intervals and not everyone will have the same question at the same time. So you can create blocks. I was going to get into that a little bit more later, but that is an option you have as well. And typically, whether you use multiple blocks or if you just use one, you will create a second block because it will be the end of the survey. It's just a thank you for taking the survey. There is a standardized thank you message that shows up if you use an end block, but you can alter it so that the end message has more information, so it can say thank you for taking the survey. If you'd like to know more about the research project when it's done, please send an email to this person or please leave me your contact information. Does that make sense? Okay. Why don't I just show how that works? So if you are putting all these blocks, you can see that all of these fall right now under default question block because we've only created one. We don't have more. But if you go up to the top, you see there's a link for survey flow. And this survey flow lets you organize and know which blocks are going to come up first. Right now we just have that one default block. We haven't added any more. But you can add new elements. You can add a new block and start a new group of questions. So say we wanted to switch it and have a movie block and a food block, and we could do that. You can branch. So if they answer a question one way, they're directed to something different than if they answer that question another way. And then since there is a branch, you can also have them join up again later so that their last question of the survey is the same. You can have that randomizer that I talked about. So again, if you wanted different people next to each other to be able to see blocks at different times, you can add the randomizer. And there's also, I think, the important one to add is the end of the survey. This is just that general thank you. You can customize it. And so if you override the survey options, you can customize the end of survey message. You can upload something else that you've typed elsewhere. But you can make it a little bit more specific if you would like. Okay. Typically, I don't think messing with blocks is going to be used too frequently. Mainly, you'll just want to know about it so you can add in the end of survey. Yeah.
The question was about reordering with instructions.
Yeah. Okay. You have a number of other options. Once you've created your survey and you're happy with it, so say we only wanted to add these questions in there, you can go through it and you can preview it to see what it actually looks like. So if I was taking this for the first time, here's my first page. Since I added a page break in, it's only going to show me those first two questions originally. And again, we put in that skip to the end of the survey if we said no. So if I said no, it would just tell me thank you, we appreciate your time. Whereas if I say yes, it will take me to the next set of questions in my survey, which again is ranking these movies. If I moved Star Wars up to the top and I didn't leave Harry Potter there, I would not get the question about which Harry Potter movie is your favorite. But if I leave Harry Potter in the #1 position, I will see that next question, which one was your favorite? And then, again, just some of the other questions that we've put in. And since we put in that end, it says, we thank you for your time, your response has been received. So you can see what it looks like. If it's not what you imagined in your head, you can go back and play with it again and try to fix it. And there are a lot of other options that can be added. Typically, again, apologize for scrolling down, I'm going to create a new item. These multiple choice, there are a few more that I want to point out. And one of them, well, two of them actually, are if you're working with web pages and you're trying to determine what is the most noticeable part of your web page, what is the function people find the most and use the most, heat maps. So heat spot and heat map are two really great ways to do that. You can send a picture of your web page, or if an advertisement, if you're working in advertising and marketing, you can send a picture and people will click on the areas that they think are the most recognizable, that are the most visible. So again, these are really great for web pages and for marketing and advertising. So I do think that those two are pretty great ones to use. You can kind of see from the side picture what it looks like. If there are any questions, please let me know about that. But the other ones that I want to point out are the advanced section. One is timing. If you put this at the beginning of a page, it lets you know, the person taking the survey won't see it, but it will let you know when you collect your results how long someone has spent on a page. So maybe I'm really interested in how long it took people to organize their movies, and if they were really conflicted about it. And so you can see, okay, well, this person only took about 3 seconds. They really didn't care about organizing it. This person took about 5 minutes, which for only 4 movies means they were having a lot of trouble figuring out which is their favorite. So you can add timing in. And the other one is a CAPTCHA, which is just making sure the person taking the survey is an actual person and not a computer. I'm sure all of you have seen these on the website before. They just have some sort of randomized words and letters that, again, you have to type in to assure the survey that you're actually a person taking it. And it can be read aloud and do all of those things as well. So typically, I think those are added at the end of surveys if you are interested in finding out that aspect. Okay. I'm scrolling to the top of the page again. There are a couple things I do want to point out. One of them is survey options. If you click the survey options, most of these aren't really necessary, but there are a few I think are pretty critical to hit on. One of them is a back button. If you're giving a quiz to a class and you want them to be able to go back and review the answers they've given, the back button before they finalize their answers and submit it is really useful. And then I also think that prevent ballot box stuffing is a great one, because if you have a survey where you're offering a reward, for example, we did one in the library not that long ago where we had drawings from the people that took the survey to get free coffee downstairs in the cafe, and so we didn't want people taking it 50 times to try to get their name in there more frequently. So if you check the box that says prevent box or ballot box stuffing, it does limit everyone taking it to just one time. And the last one that I think is pretty necessary is anonymized response. So again, if you're doing a survey and you want to tell them that their information is just for general information, that you're not actually keeping their email, keeping their names, anything along those lines, and anonymizing their response will mean that you don't even get that information. The Qualtrics survey will let them know it's anonymous when they start taking it. So it's a good one to know. Survey expiration, if you're doing this as a quiz and you have a specific date range where they have to take the quiz, it will open on a certain day, it will close on that certain day, or whenever you specify, and no one will be able to get in and answer the survey after that date has passed. So there are a couple things to look at and play around with, but I think those are probably the main ones. Let me cancel that for now. And the last part that we haven't really talked about that I think is useful are the advanced options. This also talks about blocks. You can add blocks. I think survey flow is an easier way to do this. This drop-down list I feel like isn't as functional as I would like it to be, but it does give you that option. One of you mentioned earlier, and I'm going to scroll down in this list, exporting surveys. So if you wanted to export a survey, you can send it to Excel, you can send it to Microsoft Word, any Microsoft product really. Typically, again, Qualtrics works a little bit better if you are using it online, but this does allow you to send it to Word if you wanted to print out surveys so you had a copy you could hand out. Sometimes if we want to hand them out at the desk in the reference library, we can, but it does give you that option. It says that you can translate survey, but I found that this works kind of in the same way that Google Translator does, which means not very well at all. So you can check it and see if it works, but typically I found that it's really not as useful. There are a few other things here to play around with as well, but really I think the main ones you'll want to know in this list are add block and the ability to export. Okay. And then the last things we haven't really talked about is actually getting your survey up and running. You've created it now, you can view it, but no one else can. Launching survey is what actually creates the survey so that it can be found online, it can be used, and then you actually have to activate it to collect those responses. When you've activated it, a couple things will happen. One, it will create a URL link. You'll see that in the middle of the page. The URL link can be sent through email, it can be posted to social media, you can use it however you like. You can email survey to specific recipients, so if you only wanted it to circulate throughout your department, you could specify who you wanted to send it to and where. You can do social media. Qualtrics does link into Twitter, Facebook, a number of other profiles that you can see listed on the side. I'm not familiar with some of those. I'm not going to go through too many of them, but you do have the option of sending it out through your social media in Qualtrics so that you know the link works. You can do in-page pop-ups. All of these are pretty straightforward. They are what they say they are at the top of the page. Yeah.
Let's say you have an identifier that you want to assign to a specific individual. So I have their email address and I want to give them a specific identifier. Mm-hmm. Is that possible? Yes, actually, that would be under Edit Survey. You do have the ability to do that under Survey Options. Okay. So
think if you don't anonymize, it will let you know who sent which response.
But you can pre-assign, if I work here on ID5, you may not be able to pre-assign those. It may be on, I can touch those after.
Right.
I'm not actually sure. I would have to look that up.
Be within customizing the mailing list, so that might be the other part rather than with the survey.
Not the survey, it's about actually contributing the survey.
Right. It will create its own unique
Yes.
serial number and stuff, but
You may not be able to create your.
You won't know who that serial number belongs to.
right.
Well, that's okay. I'm just saying you could, if there's a way to pre-generate,
Right.
if you have an ID and you know the email is associated with your specific signed ID, not
Right.
necessarily those Qualtrics.
Right. And yeah, that should be possible within the list.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's used so often.
I think when you get to the results, you can do that, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I can show you a way to do that as well. If you're viewing results, and Nav is going to get more into this. We don't have any results because I haven't taken. Well, no, I did take it. So you'll see that this was the one I went through and took when we were previewing the survey. So it's not an actual result, it's a preview, which is why it shows up as a survey preview. But you could go into this specific identifier, and if more people took this survey, there would be more responses listed here. So you don't know who it is, but there's this unique identifier that it automatically generates. So if you wanted to see what my results are, you could see that. And it shows up there. Is that what you were asking? Okay, so it does automatically do it. The last thing I want to point out is if you go back to the My Surveys tab, it's going to list all the surveys that you have available. The ones that are active that you have clicked that launch survey for will show up as green. The ones that are inactive show up blank. Most of these, I think, are easier to work with at the tabs at the top. Edit Survey just takes you back to that whole format that we were working with before so that you can play around with it and edit it. Results, Nav's going to show you. Sending is emailing. It takes you to that Distribute Survey tab that's at the top as well. The only one I haven't really talked about is Collaborate. If you have someone you want to work with on a survey, so say I wanted to work, I'm just going to put in my name there. I could add, Nav is the one logged in, which is why I'm adding my own name there as a collaborator. But I would add myself, and you can give them a variety of permissions. If you wanted them just to be able to view results, they could do so, but they wouldn't be able to edit the survey. If you wanted to give them full permission, you'd have to check all of those boxes. But sometimes, just letting them distribute the same survey, view results. If you have any collaborators that you want to add, that's how to do so. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nav, and he is going to talk about actually using those results. Yep. It depends if they have Qualtrics software. If they do have Qualtrics, you should be able to.
Okay. So just back here, and this was something that I took a little while figuring out because there's just so many places you can do things here that is like, oh, was it here that I do something, or was it here that I do something? So one question was just the auto numbering, because the moment when you add like 1 and 5, it's going to mess that up. So you'd click on auto numbering from advanced options, they'll clean that up. And it took me a while to see that, just because I expected it to be here, And the other thing about creating a mailing list, so if you have a mailing list with, I'm going to close this survey, okay, deactivate survey, let's confirm. Oh, okay. Just making sure I really want to close it. It's saying type close. Okay, close it. So as you see right now, it's an anonymous survey. We're sending it out as anonymous, but it is possible to, and we may not get into that, but it is possible, as Kim showed, to say, okay, within only people who get this link, or certain people I send this, and this can be from your mailing, an Excel file where you have your mailing list. And when you populate that, you say, okay, I want these people, these emails to be identified as these people, but I don't want a survey reviewer to know all that, and that is possible in there. So I'm just going to show one of the surveys we recently did with our undergraduates, or well, with all our students. We got about 658 results, and this was to show, this was to ask about how students use the libraries and what they would expect in the future, so on and so forth. This was more a quality improvement, so I took it to IRB just to make sure it was fine, and they said, no, this quality improvement, you're fine, go ahead. So didn't have to go through review or anything. And we'll look at the question formatting first, the type. Okay, this one was just, okay, if you decide to go ahead, here are your options. That's the question, the first thing that went up, and people could close at this time or move on. This one is just select one, which library to use, again, select one, an other field, fairly important. And with 15 minutes, I'm just going to run real quick through this. This is a little more with an advanced feature, but it can be really useful for people taking the survey to say, yeah, I like this, and this is how much I like it, for example. They can put in text. These are great for collecting text responses like, oh, I love the library. You posted it on your website now, And so that kind of descriptive text from people is really useful. Again, ranking, descriptive text, and here we say, okay, we're almost done. And if you would like to get this gift, please fill out this and hit submit. It'll take you to another survey, not linked to this one. So when we collect their emails, it's not linked to, this was anonymous, so it's not linked to who the respondents. So to look at the results here, okay, so first I was clicked on responses, and this shows all the responses that came in, and that's 658. So I can look at them individually if I need to. This can be especially useful if you actually do collect identifiable information and you say, or identifiable email-based surveys, and you say, okay, I want to see how somebody responded because it's useful. But this one, it's not identifiable. So I say, okay, I'd rather create a report. And here you see from that one survey, I created a report based on, okay, particular libraries. If they answered, they used Ellis, I want to create a report that has responses only for students that use Ellis journalism. I can do that with certain questions. If they answered a certain way to a certain thing, to a certain answer question, then I can say, I want to generate a report that talks about that. So let's look at how the report looks like, and this is just the basic report, and it takes a little while. So it gives a fairly out-of-the-box usable reporting system. You can export it directly to Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF. For most cases, this is enough. You don't need to manipulate the data too much. This is enough. You have a few more options, like drilling down based on a particular question. If somebody answered this way, I want to see how they answered some other questions, so you can link questions. And we'll look at that with a different question. So this one shows how many people, and I say, oh, I want to create a graph. So here, add a table or add a graph. I get options of how I want to see this. And graph options, do I want what kind of data source, percentage, mean, count, depending on what would be useful for you. Do I show value or not? Yes, let's show value. Anyway, this can be directly, and then you have all these options depending on what your needs are. And then the other, here's a bunch of text that we collected as other. And I can go from one question to another. For example, I want to see Okay, so this question, what do people think? Lots of responses here. Maybe this isn't the right format to export, but if you have fewer, it's useful. Anyway, this is for you to play and see, you know, what kind of graph might work out best for me. Maybe I want to skip. Maybe I want to chunk them into few questions or a few items at a time, and you can do that as well. So this is looking at all the options there, but I can say, well, actually, I want to limit it by a few of the columns. I just want to see the first 4 or 5 or a few of them. So it's not this huge big thing that you can't even export and print. So let's look at another one where we've done a drill down. We go back to view reports. And this one of the questions was, would you be in support of the library seeking more investment from the university? And so we did a drill down here, and people saying no. So the question is, would you support investment in the library? Answer is no. So I want to see how they went through the survey, what kinds of answers they had for every item. Why would they say that? So let's see who they are first. What did they think was important in the library? It takes a little while to generate. Yeah, it's selected wrong. No, it's just taking a while to generate. I'll just move on. Let's see. It is looking at 658, so it does take a while. So I may just skip this. But you can. The point is, you can say, based on this question, I want to see some other question based on. Okay, it's just completely slow at this point. Just go back to reports. We can take a look at another one. Let's see. I may not have named this, but we'll just do a custom filter here. Drill down by 9 again. Okay, this one. So again, based on who said yes and who said no for that particular question, investment to the libraries, and how do they respond to some other questions. Very important. Let's see if it. Oh, yes, it loaded. Now, to do any advanced statistical work, you may want to export this data and take it to SPSS. But this one is very basic. Usually for reporting quality improvement kind of things, this is perfect. Usually for doing smaller studies, perfect. So let's look at exporting some of the data. So on this one, for example, this is a copy of this. This has 658 answers. The original had 659 answers, and I found that while looking through them, that one answer was flawed, as in it probably shouldn't be included. I didn't want to delete it right over there. There was another one where the student was unsure whether, as a PhD student, they were a graduate student. So I said, okay, let me clean that up and say, if you selected PhD, you are a graduate student. So the only way to do that is to export the Excel file. You can export this whole data, take it to Excel or some other program, clean it up there, and import it back again. And Kim talked about importing data, but that's just a caveat I wanted to mention. And when I imported it back, I cleaned up that, yes, you're a graduate student, and then deleted one line. You can also delete from within the results themselves, but it's safer to have it somewhere else, bring it back. That's basically a quick run through, and I think we're very close to being done with time. So I just want to ask if you have any questions for both of us, either of us. Okay. Now across tools, it may not work.
So I just want to the university project.
Yep.
So I can export the documents from
I can answer that question. So the question was, if you have a survey somewhere else, say in SurveyMonkey, which the university used to use before it switched to Qualtrics, how do you get that into Qualtrics? If you export the survey from SurveyMonkey and save it to, say, your desktop or save it as a file, then you can come into Qualtrics and you can create a survey. And we'll want to create a blank one. So I'm just going to go through this really quick and call it test. So create a blank survey. And then under advanced options, when it pops up, which is that drop-down list that I told you could export from before, you can import as well. So right above export, there's the option to import. And you can import a file from your desktop or from anything else that you've saved. It doesn't always work if the surveys aren't compatible. So if there's an option that SurveyMonkey has that Qualtrics does not, or vice versa, it will sometimes change the formatting a bit, but you can usually edit the formatting and make it work pretty conveniently. I've tried importing or exporting surveys to my desktop from Qualtrics to see if that's a better way to save them, and I found that it doesn't always, it's not as easy as just making a copy. So if you want to have duplicate copies, instead of exporting it and then importing it back, just create a copy. But if you're getting it from another survey tool, download it, save it as a file, and then import it into Qualtrics.
You may need to see if SurveyMonkey, for example, has a switch for exporting to Qualtrics, because since there are different systems, they talk differently. So you want to see if they have a CSV or some file that that Qualtrics, for example, will accept. And I don't know what all it accepts when you do.
Well, it will have to be something you'd say to your desktop. It accepts files that you can.
Right.
So if you can export from SurveyMonkey and save it as Excel or save it as Word, then you can import it.
I mean, it's a certain file type that it'll accept. So it's a matter of playing and seeing within SurveyMonkey what kind of files you can export.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's very compatible with everything pretty much that we found. When we were running the library survey, actually brought tablets over to the Student Center and had them take it on iPads, and some of them would take it on their phones. We posted the link to social media sites, and we know some of them accessed it through other devices as well.
Get the chance for to tweet it.
Yeah.
Is there a button that shows you how it surveys, how it shows
How people.
I think the first option, the look and feel,
Yep.
it lets you test things.
It lets you see what it looks like.
There are a few options to change colors, customize this and that, but
Since Qualtrics is through the University of Mizzou, most of them will show up with this yellow background with the Mizzou logo at the top. There's not too much you can change in terms of color. You know, I don't know if you can, honestly.
you should, yeah, I mean, you should be able to, especially if it is something you use for a student project that you just want to do a small survey within class, or.
So these are the options that you have, though. I've never actually tried to do a different one. Most of them, I think, have University Library.
But some companies can have no revision.
Right. Honestly, I don't know. I might have to get back to you on that one. I'm not sure if there is a way to change what the presentation is. You probably would just have to log into Qualtrics outside of the university.
Some of these, I mean, we haven't played. We're not Qualtrics experts, but it's mostly try and test. So if you drop down from up there, you can select some of their formatting. And then you have a whole bunch of options.
Awesome, thank you. I just learned something.
I also just learned something. I'd never had to explore it, so I didn't.
So yes, it looks like you certainly can.
getting it put there. And now I'm trying to look at where we have the custom preview for different formats, because I've pointed us here.
And it's under look and feel, and then the drop down. Okay, are there other questions? Let me go back to Collaborate and see if there are any online. Mm-hmm. So close out of this. I think it does have to do with collaboration and who you allow to edit versus who you allow to just see it and export it. I find the Collaborate under my surveys a little bit easier, so I usually have stayed away from panels, and again, I'll admit I'm not an expert on all of Qualtrics. I do believe it has to do with who you allow to edit and change the survey now. So you can add members and let them edit different surveys. But I think it's easier to do it survey by survey rather than just as a sweeping everything I create, these people can edit.
Any questions about anything? IRB, one.
If we need help in the future, if we have any questions,
You can certainly contact either one of us. Our emails and all of our information is actually on the library's webpage as well. I think that all of you should have gotten an email at the start from Nav, and he's certainly a good person to contact. But if you ever lose that email or can't remember, the University of Missouri Library's website does have a Contact Us link that's down here under Quick Links. And you can look us up by name if you remember, or you can just ask a quick chat question, and whoever is on the server will direct you to the right person.
And I will also point out that DoIT, they support the tool, that they support the program, and they do run workshops quite often too. So I've looked into their workshops and their support site.
And the Division of IT also has chat and phone services as well, so if you get stuck, you can also call them.
So if you have a more technical type of question, they'd probably be able to help. For example, if you got yourself locked out of the survey or you accidentally hit something, you may have to contact them.
Okay, well, thank you for coming today. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully this helps clear it up a little bit. I think one of the easiest ways to learn it is just by playing around with it and using it. So feel free to play around and do ask us if you have any questions or you run into any problems. Yes, today's presentation you should get an email link to, is that correct? Yeah. You'll get an email with a recording that we created during the class. You can go back and rewatch it if there's anything you want to look at again.
And yes, shoot us an email or give us a call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. You're on the
Yes, that's correct. For what? Safari? I think so. When I've used it before, it's worked relatively well. It's weird because each one of them has its own little quirks.
Right.
And I have no idea why that is, but in Internet Explorer, sometimes it runs a little bit faster. In Firefox, the results come out a little bit cleaner. The graphing is a bit faster. So it really is just,
As long as